Week 7 of the college football season is right around the corner, and boy are we set up for a fantastic week of college football. 10 more matchups to predict this week. The 11th matchup, Nebraska-Minnesota, we predicted later this week. Last week I went 8-3, which is a pretty good record, although I'm just hoping that some point in time I just have a breakthrough week and get more than 8 games a week. I do like the consistency I'm on. At least getting 7 to 8 isn't that bad. But I really want to strive for 9 or 10 every single week. Maybe this week will be a breakthrough week. And I also did another top 10 video after the games are completed on Saturday night. So I'll put the link to that in the description down below. Because I know there are several of you that are only here for college football predictions purposes. So I did a top 10 ranking after the games were done. So check that out when you're done listening to this one. Kind of like last week's, nearly exactly like last week's. Very educational. There were a little bit of movement. There was a little bit of movement in my rankings last week. So check that out to see who I have where. So let's get into the Week 7 predictions. And there are a couple of Friday night matchups that really intrigue me this week. First, number 20 Virginia versus Miami. Miami, they were down big against Virginia Tech last week. Then they brought in Perry off the bench, and he threw for over 400 yards in that game. So the way I see this game is Miami's offensive line. Now, Miami's offensive line has given up almost 20 sacks, 18 to be exact. So Miami has to protect whoever the quarterback's going to be. It's not confirmed yet if it's going to be Perry or if they're going to go back to Jaron Williams or if they're going to give Tate Martell a shot at quarterback. But either way, whoever the quarterback's going to be, the offensive line has to protect whoever the quarterback's going to be. Because Virginia, they are among the top leading sack getters in college football. In fact, I believe they're in the top 5 for most sacks this season. So I'm going to predict that Miami pulls off the upset. I think Miami is going to do enough in this game to get it done. And Miami, they need a game that could change their season. And I think a win here, it could really turn the Hurricanes' fortunes around for the rest of the season. Because after this game against Virginia, every single game of Miami's schedule, it seems winnable. Except for maybe Pittsburgh, because that is going to be that wild card game. Because Pitt has upset UCF. They played number 10 Penn State really close. So other than that, I think every other game after that is very winnable for Miami. Miami isn't that bad of a team, despite their record. So I think Miami gets this win and turns their season around. I think they strike the upset 31-30. I think it's going to be a 1-point victory. I think Miami's defense steps up when it needs to. Another interesting matchup on Friday night, Colorado versus number 13, Oregon. Oregon, despite the scoreboard not looking like it, the Ducks did dominate against Cal last week. Even though the score is only 17-7. And we're not really accustomed to that in Pac-12 games. But the Ducks, they missed 2 field goals. Travis Dye fumbled twice. So Oregon could have easily had more points on the scoreboard to make that win more dominant. But Colorado is a team that could strike upset at any moment. Although the concern is for Laviska Shenault, a top 10 NFL draft prospect for April's NFL draft. So the Ducks, I think, are going to be challenged trying to contain Steven Montez and Colorado's running game. But in the end, though, I think the Ducks, I think they find a way in Eugene. I'm taking the Ducks to win, I'm going to say fairly close than what maybe the line would look like or what an analyst would think. I think the Ducks win by a score of 34-24. I think it's only going to be a 10-point victory for the Ducks, but sometimes in college football, it's survive and advance, and that's what the Ducks are going to do in this game. Next, we have a Big Ten showdown. Michigan State versus number 8 Wisconsin. Michigan State is coming off a embarrassing performance against Ohio State. The scoreboard looked more decent than what the game actually looked like. Michigan State just got completely outplayed from start to finish. And the Badgers, they're coming off their 3rd shutout of the season. But the problem with that is there are 3 shutouts this season. Now, I'm not discrediting Wisconsin in any way, shape, or form. But their 3 shutouts this season are against South Florida, Central Michigan, and Kent State. So, will Wisconsin shut out Michigan State? No. In fact, Michigan State, they could easily hang in there for a while. However, I just think that running game for Wisconsin, led by Jonathan Taylor, is going to be enough for the Badgers. I expect the Badgers to dominate this game, although Michigan State has pulled off some upsets before, but I just don't think it happens here. I think Wisconsin picks up, at the bare minimum, an 11-point victory. But I think, in reality, it's going to be a 14 to 17-point victory. Bare minimum, 11-point margin for the Badgers. I'm taking Wisconsin to remain undefeated. Next, we have a Pac-12 showdown. Washington State versus number 18 Arizona State. So Washington State, the last time we saw this team, they just completely got outmanned by Utah. And is the Anthony Gordon hype train, is it coming to a stop? Because Anthony Gordon has gotten a lot of hype all throughout this season. He is the only quarterback in college football with over 2,000 yards passing. In fact, 2,146 to be exact, if I recall. That many passing yards. However, Arizona State's defense is very ferocious. Arizona State has a convincing victory over Michigan State on the road already this season. I did forget to mark down a pick here, but I'm going to pick the Sun Devils to, in a sense, potentially keep their playoff hopes alive. Because the Pac-12's playoff hopes are still alive. Oregon and Arizona State, if they went out, they could end up finding their way into the 14 playoff. So I'm going to pick the Sun Devils to win, although I think Washington State could keep it close. But I just think Arizona State is going to use that home field advantage. Next, we have number 1 Alabama and number 24 Texas A&M. Both of these teams are coming off a bye week, and when you give Nick Saban a bye week to prepare for a team, it just provides big results. So Alabama wins this game huge. Will Texas A&M stay in the game? Well, the last time this game was in Kyle Field, it was a night game, and Alabama only won by 8. But this is a afternoon game, so 3:30 Eastern time game. I think Alabama dominates this game. I think they'll be able to move the ball at will. I think Alabama wins by at least 24 points in this game. There's really no chance for the Aggies here. Moving on to a Big 12 showdown. Texas Tech and number 22 Baylor. Texas Tech is coming off a big upset win against Oklahoma State last week. And Baylor has cracked the top 25. It's nice to see Baylor back in the top 25. This Baylor program has been through a lot. And can the Baylor Bears stay undefeated? Now, even though this game could seem one-sided statistically, I think this game is going to come down to a shootout. I think it could easily be one of those games where who gets the ball last. I see this being an offensive battle, but I think by a score of probably something outrageous like 49-44, I'm picking the Baylor Bears to remain undefeated this season and to pick up a win at home. And Baylor will climb up in the rankings. Next, we have USC and number 9 Notre Dame. The Trojans are coming off a bye week, and the last time we saw them, they played their hearts out against Washington. They just made too many mistakes at very critical times. So, despite losing by 14, the score didn't look too bad. In fact, they are down to Matt Fink at this point, their third-string quarterback. It's really hard to tell when Keaton Slovis is going to come back. And there are some injuries on that USC defense right now. Now, I think they may play in this game, but I'm not quite sure. But I think either way, I think Notre Dame is going to be too much for them to handle. I like the Irish at home this week against the Trojans. Although this is a quote-unquote rivalry game, so anything can happen in this one. But I think USC could keep this one close. I think Notre Dame, it's ideal for them to pull away in the fourth quarter. So I'm taking the Irish in this one. Next, we have a Big Ten showdown. Number 10 Penn State and number 17 Iowa. Penn State, they have looked dominant so far this season. And this is going to be a test to see how good of a team Penn State is. Now, last week, Iowa, they were in a low-scoring game with Michigan last week. Final score of 10-3. So Iowa's defense is going to be a huge question mark for me in this one. Can Iowa's defense keep Iowa in the game? Because Penn State has a very explosive offense, and they have a stout defense. In fact, if you really want to go into this being a defensive battle, these two teams are second and third in scoring defense so far this season. So that just shows how stout these two defenses are. But I think this is going to come down to which offense is going to make the plays at the right time. And for me, I think that's going to be the Nittany Lions. In fact, the last time these two teams played in Kinnick Stadium, literally a walk-off touchdown for Penn State. And could this be a similar situation? It could, but I think that Penn State's defense will make a play this time around. I think Penn State picks up a 24-17 victory. I think it's going to be up for grabs from start to finish, but I think Penn State's defense makes a stop at the end. So next we have the Red River Showdown between the number 6 Oklahoma Sooners and the number 11 Texas Longhorns. So the way I looked at this game, I see this game kind of like last year. Texas had a 45-24 lead in the fourth quarter with 8 minutes left. But then Oklahoma started to rally. They tied the game up, but Texas went down to kick a game-winning 40-yard field goal. Freshman kicker Cameron Dicker. So, the way I see this matchup, this is going to be the first real team that I think Oklahoma plays this season. I know Houston had potential early in the season, but that is really not looking like the case. So I think Jalen Hurts has a field day on this Texas defense. Because right now, Texas's weak point on their defense is the secondary. They're giving up an average of 315 yards per game, which is it's past the 120s in college football. It's probably something like 122nd, 124th. Either way, this is almost looking like a role reversal of defenses last year. Oklahoma's defense has shown improvements, but I feel like this is going to be the game where we really see if they improve or not. But luckily, Texas has a worse secondary anyway, so I think Jalen Hurts, I think he has a dominant game in this one. I think Jalen Hurts is easily going to have at least nearly 450 yards of total offense in this one. I think probably even 5-6 total touchdowns. I think Oklahoma wins this pretty convincingly. But although kind of like USC Notre Dame, it's a rivalry game, so anything can happen. But I'm just not sure what to expect out of Texas. I mean, Texas's defense, they stepped up last week against West Virginia. But I just feel like this is going to be the toughest offense that Texas has faced so far, despite LSU's offense and being the #1 scoring offense in college football right now. Still, I'm picking the Sooners to win very convincingly in this one. And finally, we have reached the game of the week. #7 Florida and #5 LSU, a top 7 matchup in Death Valley in prime time. It's going to be an epic game. Now, what is surprising me so far is that LSU is a 13, 14-point favorite. Now, that seems kind of outrageous to me, despite me thinking that Florida, they've played a little bit of weaker opponents at this point so far. But I still think that Florida shouldn't be at a 13-point underdog. I feel like maybe 8 or 9 points would be more acceptable. But Florida, I think they proved a point last week. They surprised me as well as very many people in the nation by beating Auburn convincingly the way they did. So now they go on the road to LSU to take on the Tigers. And a big key for them is containing this LSU offense, led by Joe Burrow, quarterback, who is a Heisman contender. So I think the strategy the Gators go into this game, since it's going to be a road game for them, and they're a nearly 2-touchdown underdog, I'd say you assert your running game, led by LaMichael Pirine, and just try to keep LSU's offense off the field as much as you can. Even if you start a possession 3 and out, at least running the ball a couple times, taking off a couple of seconds, maybe even getting a first down and then punting. It uses up some clock, and it rests up your defense for the fourth quarter. But the way I see this, I think it's going to be a defensive battle all throughout the game. But I think in the end, the LSU Tigers pick up a 24-21 victory over the Gators. So those are my picks for the week. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.